everybody, and welcome to Ask a Political Scientist. I am so excited that you are here. Thank you for joining us for our election series finale. I am just thrilled to pieces to have you here and to welcome our guests to tonight's show. For those of you who I don't already know, my name is Andrea Jones-Rooy, and the main thing to know about me is that I love political science, and I hope that by the end of this show, you love political science as well. Or if you already love political science, then you're here to celebrate with me. I am also proud to share, some of you already know this, that we are founding members of the world's smartest podcast network. This includes the Political Orphanage and the Lost in America podcast. Please check out those shows if you enjoy this one, and heck, even if you don't. Today's show, we are talking about getting out the vote. I don't know about you, but it is something that is very much on my mind. If you're in the chat, go ahead and let us know if you have voted. My plan is to vote tomorrow morning. Happy to let you all know if I actually go do it. I will do it. So tomorrow morning. And we are going to talk about a couple of different things. We are going to talk about what motivates people to vote, what kind of outreach actually works, and some concrete ideas for if you want to get involved in voting and voter outreach in the next few days before November 3rd, what sorts of things you can do. Now, voting is one of my absolute favorite topics. And if you have seen me perform live or came to the very first live stream of Ask a Political Scientist back in March, you've seen me talk about this equation. Before we dive into our interview with our guests, I just want to share this equation that, frankly, I think is all we need to know about voting. All right, here we go. Let's see if there's more to say after this. Here is what predicts how people vote, right? This simple equation. So what does this mean? P times B plus D is greater than C. This is a famous equation in political science. P is the probability that you out there who goes to vote, cast the vote that breaks the tie that causes one side or the other to win. The probability that you cast the winning vote. B is the benefit you get if your candidate wins. C is the cost of voting. So when P times B plus D is greater than C, it's better than the cost of voting. People are going to vote. And D is my favorite term. It is your civic duty. It is the joy and satisfaction you gain from participating in the democratic process, for declaring your support of a particular candidate, and for being a part of democracy. Now, one of my favorite things about this equation is that this has led political scientists to ask a lot of questions like, how can we get Americans to have a bigger D? And they say so non-hilariously, but I find it hilarious. So P for most people is close to zero. B, for me at least, this election, the benefit I get if my candidate wins is close to infinity. D, my satisfaction for voting is quite high. C, the lines are long, but for the most part, I think it's okay. But if you're thinking about how to help people vote, you can think about how you could go out and reduce the costs of voting. So if you're thinking about what to do in the next few days, and some of the stuff we'll be talking about are going to be all about how do we increase D, this satisfaction, this sense of duty around voting. What are things that we can do to decrease C? So make the lines less long, make the lines less miserable, maybe be a poll volunteer if it's not too late. And also there's a cost to getting information about voting. So how can you make the cost to getting informed lower? If you know a lot about local races, can you share it with folks who maybe don't have time or access to that information? So that's what you can do. And if nothing else, you can remind people that if you're anything like me, the benefit to your side winning is approximately infinity. So it makes a lot of sense to get out the vote. All right, now if that equation didn't excite you as much as it excites me, fear not, we will not be talking about too much math after this. We have two amazing guests tonight. I'm so excited to welcome them to the show. First, we have Chinbo Chong, who is at Indiana University. She earned her PhD in political science at the University of Michigan. Of course, we have a very strong Michigan bias here at the show. She is the author of several great projects that we will be talking about. In particular, we're going to talk about her book project, Identity Appeals in the Age of Immigration, and a paper called Blood is Thicker Than Association, an investigation of the persistence of national origin identity on voting for Kamala Harris. So we will be talking about both those things with Chinbo. In the second half of the show, we're very excited to welcome our expert practitioner guest. We have Kate Mayer here. We are so thrilled that she's here. She is the founder and CEO of an organization called Friends Vote Together. You can go to friendsvotetogether.com or at Friends Vote Together on Instagram. And she posts all kinds of amazing resources and encourages people to get involved in things like phone banking. Here are just a few of the posts that resonated with me. There's a post on Instagram that's all about how to have maximum impact in getting out the vote. A very powerful reminder that gave me a lot of guilt. Just 2 hours a week, you could change history and save our democracy. So 2 hours, if you can do that between now and November 3rd, that would be great. And lots of ideas for places to phone bank for maximum impact. So we'll talk to Kate in the second half of the show for some concrete tips. Finally, we raise money in every one of these shows for a good cause in lieu of tickets. So if you're able to financially contribute, we always appreciate it. Although, of course, I know things are pretty miserable for a lot of people, so don't worry about it. But if you enjoy the show and you can contribute, no amount is too small. This week, all of our funds are going to go to 50-50 to 2 organizations, unless you specify, I guess, in the comments if you have a preference. They are 2 organizations dedicated to helping Asian American businesses that are suffering due to lost business because of discrimination during the pandemic. So the 2 organizations are Save Our Chinatowns, which supports Chinese and Asian American run small businesses in San Francisco and Oakland, and the Asian Americans for Equality Emergency Small Business Relief Fund, which supports businesses in Chinatown in New York City, as well as the Lower East Side and the East Village. So I guess when you donate, paypal.me/AskAPS, you could specify if you want it to go to San Francisco or New York, or I'll just split it when I donate. So thanks for that if you're able to contribute. All right, here's how we're going to spend our time tonight. We are going to talk with Chimbo about her research on what motivates people to vote and what kind of outreach works. Kate's going to join the show and help us think about what we can do in the next few days to make a difference. And finally, we want to hear from you. There is a live stream chat going on YouTube. I will take a look at that chat and fold in questions you have towards the end of the show. So anything on your mind as we are discussing, please share your questions and I'll deliver them to our lovely guests. So that is it from me. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to our first guest, Chinbo Chong. Chimbo, how are you?
Hi, good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Are you staying well and safe and all those things?
Yep, very comfortable and safe, thankfully.
Excellent. Well, I'm very envious of your fireplace. New York City, it's freezing starting today, so very good there. And how are you feeling in the lead up to the election? Anxious, excited, crying?
Anxious,
like I am?
anxious, excited for it to be over, but I know whatever happens, we still have to deal with it. But
right,
just staying safe
yes.
in my apartment for the most time.
We still have to deal with it is a good reminder. Very good. So, all right. So I want to talk about your research, but first, if you don't mind, I'm going to put you on the spot a tiny bit. For those who have not spent their careers thinking about political science, how have political scientists, generally speaking, thought about what motivates people to vote? I know it's a big question in the field, so I'm being a little unfair, but what are some of the big ideas in terms of what motivates people to vote?
Yeah, so I like to think of that question in 2 different ways. So you could think of it as some factors that you're sort of internally motivating you to go out, and there are other aspects has to do with external influence. So people coming out to reach out to you. So internally, I'm thinking things in terms of the kinds of resources you have. The more information, the more time you have, the more likely you're going to do something about your community. And there are psychological reasons for why you might want to go out to vote. So in the case of American politics, party identification and political party orientation is very strong. So there might be a tendency for people to go out and want to see their party win through the election. And like you also mentioned in the beginning of our show, there are intrinsic value for participating in politics. It's sort of this civic duty that comes from going out to cast your vote, and you feel like you sort of contributed to this bigger democratic system. Okay. And then so there are just multiple things happening. External factors, meaning like political parties, come and reach out to you, and organizations doing more of the work for you to come out and vote.
Okay, so let me see if I got this right. So the things that predict or make it more likely for me to turn out to vote are, so my resources, right? Do I have the time? Maybe childcare, maybe taking off work, ability to get to the polls, ability to wait at the polls, all those things. And you could imagine that being different across different groups of people. Motivation, intrinsically, how much do I care either about being part of the system or about like showing off that I stand for this person or voting for my team. And then this last piece, which I didn't really talk about in my opening, which I think we're going to talk about, which is other people encouraging you to go do it. Is that fair? That's that external piece?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Okay. And am I correct that your work is more focused on that external piece, right? That outreach?
Yeah, so so my work specifically looks at minority voters, or those who are sort of new to the system, who have not had experiences in participating in the American democratic system. And so oftentimes we find that many of these groups are less likely to be registered to vote, less likely to be reached out to political institutions like parties and big campaign organizations. And so having that additional touch or additional effort to incorporate them to the political participatory sphere, it sort of wants them to be more engaged than they were before.
Okay. And so when you say new voters, do you mean like newly became US citizens, or young voters who are voting for the first time, or someone who's been living in the US for a long time or grew up in the US but just hasn't voted? So what is new in this case?
So when I say new voters, I'm specifically talking about immigrant voters who are newly naturalized. So there are studies that show that people who are first-time registered voters are more likely, first-time naturalized voters are more likely to be more enthusiastic about the election itself.
Okay. Okay. And so, and you said minority groups. So what groups in particular are you focused on?
Yeah, so my book project specifically looks at Asian Americans and Latinos, who are the fastest and the largest growing American electorate in our current system. Currently, both of these groups represent 1/3 of the American electorate, and it's predicted that they're going to continuously grow in the next 25 years or so.
Hang on. So right now, 1/3 of the American electorate are a mix of Asian American and Latino voters. Is that right?
And African American voters as well.
African American.
Yeah.
I see. So very good. Cool. So okay, and then they're in the next 25 years just going to be the most massive group ever, basically.
Yes. Yeah.
Term.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Okay. And so, and your work is about reaching out to these new Asian American and Latino voters, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got interested in this project because there was a point in my life where I was wondering, do these kinds of labels like Asian American or Latino / Hispanic labels, do they actually resonate with the communities that are receiving these label appeals itself? And the kind of the puzzling part about this is that if you look at survey level data, you could quickly find and see that many of these community members perceive or see themselves based on their national origin identity. So Chinese, Korean, Japanese, Mexican, Cuban, Puerto Rican, and so on and so forth. So the question is, if the preferred identity is their national specific origin identities, do these broad-based appeals actually work? And we actually don't have, we have very little evidence in political science that shows whether one identity appeals work better than the other.
I see. So the idea is, so I'm hypothetically on the Biden campaign, and I'm reaching out to a Chinese American household to say, hey, have you heard about getting out the vote, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm saying Asian American when I contact them. Is that the question here?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So we saw a rise of broad-based appeals by the Obama campaign and previous campaigns that try to appeal to the Asian American. So I'm specifically talking about the Asian American case, where you would see these political campaigns and elites making these broad-based appeals. And it's actually not clear whether these broad kind of umbrella term categories are actually resonating with the community themselves.
I feel like I can picture, I don't know why I'm thinking about this for the Obama administration, because there has been an election since. But yeah, like Asian Americans for Obama stickers that like you could buy in DC or online or whatever. So okay, so why, this will sound like a naive question, but why wouldn't those work? Why would it be more powerful for if I said Chinese Americans for Obama or reached out with an appeal to someone's national identity as opposed to this sort of pan-ethnic identity?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So if you look into history and the development of these identities through the OMB and the U.S. Census, you find that both the Asian
OMB?
American, OMB, Office of Management and Budget.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, so there was a massive effort by the bureaucracy in wanting to sort of categorize these communities for like allocation of resources, and you quickly find that these terms are relatively new. They haven't existed for like centuries. They were developed in the early 60s, and they were sort of imposed by the elites, for lack of a better word, to describe and categorize these individuals from disparate countries from Asia to Latin America as well.
So are you saying that? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. The description of that sort of short historical fact is to sort of advance this idea that someone from mainland China may not understand what Asian American means, and as well as individual from Thailand and so on and so forth. It's a very American-centric and American term to describe Asian Americans, and also similar for Latino and Hispanic community.
I see. So it sounds like you're saying that, a bunch of probably, I don't know for sure, but I would guess mostly white Americans sitting in a room saying, how are we going to count up people? Didn't come up with a thoughtful set of categories that actually respected the diversity of where people are coming from. This is shocking news to me.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, but I do have to, insert the fact that other community organizers and leaders within these communities also took part in this as well. So it's not just, but there was a specific reason for their involvement in wanting to collectively represent these groups for representational purposes and community resources.
Right, that's fair. That's fair. You get more resources if you can, I don't know, group up together, I suppose.
Yes, yeah.
Fair. I see. So I really am interested in this point that, someone moves here from mainland China and isn't all of a sudden like, yes, I identify as Asian American. Please refer to me and my community that way.
Yes, yeah. So I don't know if I mentioned this, but I'm also an immigrant from Korea. I came here at a young age, and I didn't know what Asian American was. I had to learn. It's like a socialized identity and socialized concept, and racialized. It's very political. There's some political history that is orienting these broad-based labels. So in my art book project, I argue that these are sort of socialized terms and labels and group identity that sort of one has to learn over time.
I see. And the same, I would imagine, or something similar, at least for Latino folks in the United States, where if you're from Mexico versus Cuba, you have a very different identity. Of course, that isn't appropriately captured with such a blanket term.
Right. Yes.
So okay. So what do you find in your research? How do you go about exploring this, and what are some of your results?
Yeah. So I run a survey experiment looking at where I set up a fictitious 2 candidates at a local city council election. I have the respondents look at compare the 2 candidates, where in one frame I show candidate who is being endorsed by their national origin identity versus being endorsed by an Asian American organization versus a generic organization. So in that setup, I find that contrary to what we know in political science and current research, I find that these broad-based appeals are sort of indifferent. These respondents, when they see this particular frame, they're sort of not excited nor turned off by this broad-based appeal, which is it doesn't resonate as much as the national origin appeal, which I find to be more effective than the broad-based appeals itself. Okay. And I find this to
Go ahead.
I find similar effect for both groups, for Asian Americans and Latinos.
Excellent. And so if I'm a mainland Chinese voter, and I hear that this candidate was endorsed by an organization that's Chinese American something something, that will move the needle for me. But Asian American wouldn't do anything.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Mhm.
Now, you've done some work on, you studied Senator Harris before she was cool and looked at her campaign, which is very prescient. Who are you studying now? That'll tell us who to pay attention to in 4 years.
I'll keep that a secret.
Okay, very good. Okay, we'll talk later. I will buy that information from you. So Senator Harris, 2016 Senate race, you studied, you basically explored this theory through that race. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
And what did you look for and what did you find there?
Yeah, so I was really interested in whether this broad Asian American identity itself is long lasting. So if we believe that Asian American political consciousness, as we might think of it, exists, then we would expect various national Asian origin groups to support an Asian American candidate running for a political office. So one case that led me to look at this was 2016 Senate race for Senator Harris in California. And the analysis that I did based on the 2016 National Asian American Survey led me to this result, which is controlling for all the various social demographic factors. I find that out of all the Asian national origin groups in California, Asian Indians were like the most enthusiastic, coefficient was large, it was statistically significant in support for Senator Harris over Loretta Sanchez.
So Indian Americans were super excited about Senator Harris in 2016. Was there still an effect of maybe a weaker one, but still of other Asian Americans, or did other Asian Americans look like any other voter, a white person or a Latino or whatever?
Yeah, so I can't speak to whether the other Asian groups looked similar to white or black voters, but the coefficient was positive, strong, and it was like it stood out most compared to other Asian national origin groups.
Okay. So coefficient for those who haven't taken a stats class in a while, like effect size, right? Magnitude of the effect. So I want to ask you, what about this is unfair, but I'm thinking of Andrea Benjamin's work. She was our very first guest on the show, and she studies co-ethnic endorsements. And I'm curious if you've explored that as well. So if like a Latino organization endorses Kamala Harris, does that increase interest among Latino voters in an Asian American candidate? Or am I just totally unfairly asking you about someone else's research now?
So that's her territory, and I can't really speak to like outgroup endorsement affecting, inclusion of the outgroup of voters preferring that candidate.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that result for Senator Harris in 2016 is kind of how would you say this? Consistent with this idea that perhaps maybe this idea of like Asian American consciousness is kind of fictitious or very temporal, and so that I think there needs to be more investigation behind the ingredients that make up this consciousness around this new sort of disparate and very diverse community like Asian Americans.
Right. And I'm thinking now about, after the DNC and Senator Harris gave her speech and everything, there was a big buzz about her being, a Black woman, an Asian woman. And I do believe that there was some talk about her as an Indian American woman, right? And that,
yes.
Are you seeing these effects in 2020 like you saw in her Senate race?
So I do. So surprisingly, I have been following carefully about on how these campaigns are reaching out to minority voters, and I guess they hired like more specialized campaign managers, but surprisingly, the Biden campaign has been very intentional about reaching out to various national origin specific groups. So, we have like Filipinos for Biden and Harris, Chinese Americans for Biden and Harris. And so I do think there has been more effort, more kind of culturally appropriate effort to court these voters and to include them into the democratic process. And so so in echoing Senator Harris's Democratic Vice President nomination speech or acceptance speech, I saw a Twitter from Joe Biden, maybe like right around Autumn Festival, where a lot of the Asian or international countries were celebrating this like Thanksgiving. And I saw a tweet that said, like, Jill and I are, excited to be celebrating Chuseok, which is Korean Thanksgiving, with the Korean American community today. And they said something that was like very culturally appropriate, and I thought it was really good. So I'm just gonna quote here. Yeah. Jill and I are Jill and I. I'm just gonna skip over this, but basically they said like 행복한 한가위, which is very. It's not just about like have a happy Thanksgiving, but it resonates with the aspect of idea of family within the Korean culture. So I thought they hired someone very in tune with the culture itself. So I do see a lot of effort from the Democratic Party doing more of that work.
Well, I was going to say, are they just reading your research, or are you the secret advisor on this? Because that is, and did you not see this in, Hillary Clinton's campaign or Obama or any other major Democratic race previously?
Yeah. I don't know if they're reading, but I did talk to campaign managers here, like organization, like outreach managers. But compared to, Obama and the Clinton campaign, I haven't seen anything like this to this effect. So I think that's interesting.
If the Asian American vote does it for Biden, it's due to Chimbo. That's the final word on that. So, okay, I'm curious how or whether the Trump campaign is doing anything as far as outreach to different populations or not.
Yeah, I think the two campaigns have a very different strategy. So the Democratic campaign is more about inclusion, whereas this is just based on my observation, and maybe there could be more studies on this, but the Republican campaign is more about divide and conquer. It's very divisive, and especially, regarding the hate crimes that are coming out from our current ongoing pandemic, where you hear President Trump and his Republican allies, racializing coronavirus as a Chinese virus. And so I think that kind of raising the salience of anti-China has really swayed other communities like the Vietnamese Americans to align themselves with the Republican candidate because of their past historical geopolitical histories with China. So I recently read just a few days ago in the new NBC Asian America report where political scientist Karthik Ramakrishna was interviewed in that piece, where he stated some historical reasons for why this divisive language might be something that Republican Party has picked up. So I believe that I have the sense that the Republican campaign is really taking advantage of dividing people and kind of conquering them in different ways.
Well, it's interesting that it's a totally different strategy, of course, but it is kind of appealing to the same mechanism that you're describing, which is this nationalist appeal as opposed to this pan-ethnic or pan-Asian type of outreach, right? So by virtue of signaling, there's something special about China, or by using derogatory terms, it actually ignites other communities in a negative way, or getting their support, but through sort of dislike or divisiveness, as you said.
Yeah. So uplifting that particular national origin group or denigrating that national origin group.
Right.
But regardless, the national origin identity is sort of consistent for both campaigns right now.
Right. Now, I want to ask, do you study Black voters or Black identity at all? And thinking about Senator Harris's identity as a Black candidate as well, is that something that comes up in your research, or are you focused more exclusively on Asian American and Latino voters?
Yeah. Once in a blue moon, I wanted to compare all those three, but because there are still immigrant population within the Black community as well that we just we're not really aware. But other political scientists have looked at that specifically. So I don't do that specific work, but what I can say is these three groups, if you will, have been racialized differently. So their attachment and the meaning behind African American, Asian American, and Latino are very different. Right. And so that's sort of the motivation I have in comparing both of these Asian Americans and Latinos in my book project. And I will save that result so that you could go buy the book and I could actually write the book itself.
Very good. Yes. Write the book. Let us know. We'll have you back on for a book launch party. All right. Well, let me, I have more questions for you about outreach to voters and what we learned from your research, but let me bring Kate into the conversation and we'll see what she has to say. And then we'll talk about how it connects back to your research. So everyone at home, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Kate. Hello. Welcome.
Hey guys. How are you?
Good. Nice to see you. Are you staying in low anxiety at least, or no?
One Reese's peanut butter cup at a time.
Very good. That's how we'll get through.
That's the magic over here these days.
New Instagram handle, friends together with chocolate and peanut butter.
How did you get through the election? One Reese's peanut butter cup at a time. Yeah. Not sponsored, by the way. Not sponsored.
Right. Yes. No one's making money here. That's the key takeaway here. So, Kate,
yes.
You are very interested in getting people to vote, is my understanding. Can you tell us a little bit about Friends Vote Together? Yep. And in particular, I'm curious to hear what your recommendations are to folks watching right now who are thinking, oh gosh, how can I do something useful between now and Election Day?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast so far, and I'm thrilled to be here. So Friends Vote Together was actually born out of a phone banking call. That's kind of how it came about. And I created this movement with two main goals. One is to create a platform where people can take action. They can phone bank, text bank, participate in civic action and activism, and make that easy for them, understanding how much else is going on in our world right now. And the second goal being creating this community of friends across the United States, new friends, old friends, especially again in this moment where we're all distanced and we're all at home and we all aren't out door to door canvassing or together in this election cycle. And it has been really cool to see those things happen organically. We are a grassroots organization, and it's happened kind of, organically. And similar to kind of what you were explaining at the beginning of this equation, which totally perked up my ears, my background is business strategy, business development, building companies kind of from the ground up. And the way that I look at elections and voting is from kind of an operational and strategic point. And that's kind of what I've tried to do with this community in taking action, right? That when something happens, RBG passes away, the SCOTUS nomination, let's not panic give and just, kind of head down, do whatever we think, but think strategically, right? In terms of kind of higher level from president down to local races, how can we take action that's going to have the most impact? And then in those moments of crisis and panic, what do we do that is really going to, what's the mathematical equation that's going to solve people to turn out and vote and to elect leaders that we want to create change that we need? And so that has kind of been my strategy in approaching this. In terms of action right now, the sharpest, most powerful tool that we have in our toolbox is our voice. And whether you use that in talking to your friends and family, what we call kind of relational organizing, whether that's text banking and talking to voters, whether that's phone banking, whether that's, however that may be, everything that we are doing right now, your conversations have to be revolved around voting and around the election. So as simple as you texting a friend, asking if they've seen the latest Netflix series. Hey, did you register hey, did you vote yet? What's your voting plan? When are you going to vote? Did you know there's a drop box that just got located down the street? Every conversation. So there's kind of really the two buckets that we talk about in those conversations. And the relational ones are a little easier because you already have those relationships, right? They're your friends, your families, your coworkers, but push yourself outside of your bubble and think about, okay, Who do I know that lives in Wisconsin? Who did I go to college with that lives in Pennsylvania that I can reach out to and have these conversations? And the second aspect is kind of that cold, conversations with voters that we don't have the relationships with. And that's where phone banking comes in. And really in this moment of isolation and pandemic, the most powerful thing that we can do is phone bank. And that the reasoning behind that is we are having these direct verbal conversations with voters. When we text bank, we hope that the voter is on the other end of the phone. When we write a letter or send a postcard, we hope and assume they're going to read it. But we're not necessarily there to confirm that. On top of that, especially in this confusing and challenging election cycle, there may be additional questions that we can't answer for a voter with a letter or a postcard that we can right now on a phone bank. So the phone banks that are happening literally now until through Tuesday are all focused on getting out the vote, right? And right now what we really want to do is provide people the resources and the information that they need to vote. I had a call yesterday with Texas with a man in Texas that I said, do you know where you're going to vote? Yep, I'm going to vote and blah, blah, blah. And when you're on these phone banks, they give you scripts. And I said, actually, your polling place has changed. He had no idea. And so had we not had that conversation, he would have gone to the wrong place. Who knows if he would have gotten to the right place to go vote. And so the good news is that the Democratic Party has now been phone banking for years/months and really narrowed down this list of the people we're calling right now are the people that we need to get to the polls. And those are the people that are undecided. They haven't voted in the past. They haven't been reached in a way that has been motivating to them. And something I think that Chimbo said that's really interesting to me too is that, at this point, you're going to get those persuasion conversations. You're going to have them here and there,
right.
But it's really about the information. And I think the most effective thing in doing that, besides providing information, is that connection, right? Connecting to them as a fellow Latino voter, as a immigrant, as a individual whose parent passed away from COVID. Those human connections, that is what gets people to turn out and vote, not just shouting information at them and saying, you have to go vote on this day, go here, do this. That connection is, and to couple to what you talked about, I've never seen anything like that in any campaign in terms of kind of that inclusion and connectiveness that I've seen this year.
As someone who likes to shout information at people, and is
hey, I do too. It's all right.
Very scary for me. So, what advice do you have for folks who maybe want to do phone banking but are nervous about calling up a stranger or afraid of getting yelled at, hypothetically? What do you say to folks like me who are scared?
Yeah, totally. It happens. Like, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you're not going to get hung up on, or someone's not going to call you some, awful name or cuss at you. It happens. But for every 3 or 4 of those calls, I call the pearl and the oyster. You get this pearl and the oyster where you have literally changed someone's life because they are going to vote. They are going to vote because of a call that you made. And that is like, for me, I think that is like the greatest gift in right now in this moment that we're in, right? And I understand it can be scary and overwhelming. I've been in your shoes, and I've been on phone banks recently that I have been scared and overwhelmed on. I get it. But again, campaigns like they have become more inclusive and really targeted and thoughtful. The technology and the process and the scripts, everything now is so, we are light years ahead of where we were 2 years ago. And they make it easy for you. And there's a lot of phone banks that you can join where you're part of this is the community and the connection too, beyond helping the voter, right? And organizations like Knock for Democracy do an incredible job where you jump on the Zoom, they train you, you all stay on the Zoom together. You can ask questions as you go, they cheer you on, people share their conversations in the Zoom chat. It's really a cool, experience to be part of. And I will say this, this is going to sound like me shouting, but going against exactly what I just said.
Yeah.
We have less than 5 days now.
Yeah.
That's it, right? Like,
yeah,
I'm shouting at it now. Like, this is it, guys. Like, we literally have no time right now to say, I'm going to get to that next week. No, we don't have next week. So right now, your Netflix series, it's going to have to wait. The book that's sitting on your bedside table, it's going to have to wait, because we cannot wake up next week and say, should have jumped on a phone bank. I should have called my uncle in Wisconsin. I should have done this. We cannot be in that position next week. And so it is going to take all of us to do a little bit more and step outside of our comfort zone and come together as a community in this amazing country that we are, to support and help other citizens of this country.
All right, I'll do it.
Did I convince you?
Yeah,
Wow.
Are you going to join me in phone banking? What's the plan? Should we just stop
Listen,
the show
I
now?
will do it with
Yeah,
you.
let's do it.
Totally.
That would be bold. I'll just do it live. That's
Let's
exciting.
do it.
That's
We
exciting.
actually were talking about when doing one this weekend, of like a group of us of like, but you probably have the technology figured out for this. We couldn't figure out the like technology aspect of recording it while we were on our phones and computers, but
We'll talk. So where can people who are watching this and saying, oh my goodness, all right, I'm persuaded I need to phone bank. How do I start? Where do I go?
So, typically, and this is kind of where Friends Vote Together movement came from. There's the Biden campaign. There's Democratic parties in every state that are running phone banks. There are incredible organizations like Mi Gente, who's focused on the Latinx community and phone banking and getting them to turn out to vote. There's so much good stuff happening. It can be overwhelming, and that's a good problem we have. And so for the Friends Vote Together movement, we make that easy for you. So come to our Instagram. We post, tomorrow it'll be for the weekend, but usually it's during the week, the weekly phone banks that have the most impact. And that is research-based. We've done all the phone banks, so we're not going to put you on one that you're not going to get trained or you're going to have a bad experience. And ones that right now we have a pulse on where we need to focus our energy and turn out the vote. And so those are the ones that are really going to have the most impact. And kind of similar to what we were talking about before, I think a lot of these campaigns are great because they kind of hit from the high level. But in this moment, the most impactful ones are the ones that you can have those connections, right? Where you can call someone and say, I am as well an immigrant, and I want to talk to you about why I am voting for Biden down ballot races, right? And so come to our page. We will post tomorrow the phone banks for this weekend and Monday and Tuesday. If anyone has questions, I've offered this matchmaking service that if you don't know what to do, you're confused, send me a message on a DM, or you can send me an email through our website, and I will match you up with a phone banking plan from now through Election Day.
Very good. So Friends
No
Vote Together
excuses.
on Instagram. All right, we'll have a big Ask a Political Scientist go at it. Very good. And Ask a Political Scientist will finally give up its pretending to be nonpartisan. Finally. Let's just admit it. So, okay, so I want to ask you about. You focus a lot on flipping the Senate and Senate races in addition to the national presidential election. But before I do that, Chimbo, I want to check in with you. So your research suggests that outreach in sort of more national, more individual appeals as opposed to Asian Americans, right? Something more nuanced. Is there other research that suggests like should folks who speak Spanish try to be doing outreach in Spanish, or who speak Mandarin try to do it in Mandarin, or and also I'll ask this to both of you. What about hypothetically a white person who's not great outside of English and wants to reach out to marginalized communities? Is that effective? Will that backfire? Chimbo, your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I definitely. So it seems like, Kate, your organization is doing the right thing, making it personable as much as possible. So in political science, like doing a face-to-face get out the vote effort is much more effective than anything that's more sort of distant from the party that you're trying to reach out to. So there are sort of research that have been done in the past that looks at co-ethnic outreach. So do voters who go out to knock on the doors, do they need to be Chinese if they're going to a Chinese neighborhood? There tends to be more, it tends to be more effective if the match is like more or less more congruent to the person that you're reaching out to. And so language also does definitely help. And so like this is also kind of speaking to my own kind of activist experience, where I've also done phone banking to the Asian American community, where I'm also fluent in Korean, and so I could actually have a conversation and connect with them at by speaking our native tongue. So I do think delivering messages in their own language actually will amplify and sort of make them want to go out and figure out where their registration address are, where they need to go out to vote for.
So Kate, if folks do speak Spanish or Mandarin or Korean or whatever, is there, I guess I would imagine that there's scripts in multiple languages and things like that?
Yeah, and there's
yeah. So
sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead, Kate.
There are language-specific phone banks. We posted some today that Mi Gente is doing in the battleground states, trying to turn out the Latinx community. And kind of to what we were talking about earlier of seeing things change, two things. One is, Jimbo, you're exactly right. Like, the greatest thing we could do is go door to door and have conversations with people. We're kind of in a position where that can't happen. So our kind of and some states are doing it this weekend because we're kind of at that point where it's like, okay, we got to turn out the vote. So, phone banking is really our only tool in many states right now. And so I totally agree with you on that. I think, this is the first year I've seen French phone banks. I've seen Chinese phone banks. I've seen Japanese phone banks. I've seen these, and there's not many, but there are a few. But previously, in previous years, it was just Spanish and English. And even, the voter protection hotlines, which there's nonpartisan voter protection hotlines and Democratic run voter protection hotlines. It's been, kind of the let's just say 6 to 7 languages previously. And now I'm seeing, I had to look up what some of these languages were. It was so incredible to see the expansive nature. And there really is a need for that. There is a need for people that speak these other languages to sign up and help these communities because, I called into Arizona and I got someone speaking Spanish. My Spanish I failed Spanish 101 3 times in college. So that tells you about how good my Spanish is.
Hola, hi.
I'm like, no comprende.
Right.
Hold on.
Right.
But, I think that is a testament to, number one, the research that's being done, because we are now seeing the impact and that's why I think this is so cool, like kind of from your background of what comes out of this election, right? To see the statistics and the data that come out from, we've had these opportunities. Did it impact voter turnout or not? Right. And how we kind of build on this. But yeah, I think there are those opportunities. We post a bunch on our website. And if you do speak a language and it's not on our site, let me know and I will get you the resources information.
Cool. So we have a couple questions from the audience. So Camille is asking, we touched on this a bit, but can you speak to different types of canvassing and how effective those types are?
Yeah. So as I said, typically in a normal election cycle, we would be, all of us, boots on the ground, every state, every county, knocking on doors, talking to voters. Unfortunately, with the situation that we're in with the pandemic, that's not feasible in many places. States like North Carolina, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Arizona a little bit, a few states are regulating very COVID safe canvassing opportunities this weekend, which again, they're on our page if you live in those states or know anyone in those states. And there's really kind of, two things that we're doing right now. One is providing literature, providing education materials. Voting laws are changing every day. Just Wisconsin on Monday, we had a change in absentee ballots and deadlines. So providing that literature on people's doors so that they have it. And then the other canvassing right now that's happening is knocking on doors, taking a step back 6 feet in a mask and having that conversation. Hey, I didn't know, in our database, it looks like you haven't voted yet. You haven't voted in a couple of years. What information do you need? There's also a lot happening right now with ballot curing, which is a new kind of thing that we're talking about. And in brevity, ballot curing basically is you have a deficiency on your ballot. So you forgot to do the witness signature or the signatures don't match. Every state is different of how they handle it. Some states don't let you cure at all, which means you fix the discrepancy. Other states,
in that case,
what'd you say?
Like the ballot just
gets thrown out. Absolutely.
I'm having hanging Chad flashbacks. Just so we're clear.
North Carolina is a state that didn't have this. And now in North Carolina, we have ballot curing. Well, guess what? It's been held up in court for 3 weeks. And so just as of last Monday, were clear and we had about 10,000 ballots we had to cure, or those ballots weren't going to get counted. And so it's been, on phone banks, ballot curing, and we're doing a little bit of that now in person in Pennsylvania, Georgia, and North Carolina, because we can't get these people on the phone, or they're not being responsive in some capacity that we need them to fix their ballot. They don't know. I mean, it's not their fault. This is, a whole new thing.
Right.
So yeah.
As you said, different in every state, and yeah. Okay. So I have let's see, a couple questions. First, a comment from Rob, a shout out to documentary filmmaker Yi Chen, who just released her film First Vote, which profiles several Chinese Americans who have become activists on various points in the U.S. political spectrum. Do you both know about this? This is news to me.
You know about? I haven't heard it, but I just wrote it down.
I will watch this in the weekend, during my weekend. Yeah.
After Tuesday, remember.
Oh, right. Yeah. Very good. Excellent. So First Vote, cool, very cool. We have a couple questions. I'm gonna lob two at you both and see how we do. So another question from Rob: how does a phone bank ensure that the voters whose numbers that are called have decent potential? How are the lips developed and curated? I also have that question because I'm currently getting about 1 million texts about voting, and I just keep want to be like, save your time, like send it to someone else. So where did this list come from? And a second question from Kathy, thoughts about the Movement Voter Project?
So we're going to tackle the database one first.
Let's start with the database.
Okay.
Yeah.
So your voting record is public record. Anyone can find out if you voted in the past. So not to shame you guys, but if you don't vote in this election, we'll know. We can find that. We won't necessarily know who you vote for, but we'll know you didn't vote. Just saying. Just put that little plug in there. And so, organizations, the Democratic Party, all these other organizations, they have access to that data, and you can buy it, right? You buy the databases, really. And so the reason you're getting so many calls is there all are these organizations that are trying to get you to vote, because in the records it shows you haven't voted yet.
If I vote, will they stop? Because it actually, I would vote anyway, but it actually would help.
So that's a really good point, and that's a really good point. So again, listen, this isn't like you vote at 3:00, you come off the list at 4:00. This is, we're talking about like there's American a lot going on in these states. This doesn't happen automatically, but that's the power of phone banking too right now, is because these lists, we've also spent a year plus working on, okay, when you phone bank, you have to mark if it's the wrong number, if it's the wrong address. Unfortunately, we're in a time of COVID, we've called a lot of people that have died. And so we need to go and put that in the database, and like part of phone banking too is cleaning up these databases for us to be more powerful and successful for years to come, right? And so when you're calling now, we are taking people off the list that have already voted. But if you voted yesterday, you're probably still going to be on the list today. So my point to you is two things. One is go vote, because you'll come off the list and stop getting the calls. It's pretty simple. But also, this, I know it's frustrating. I like my phone blows up every day, and I get it. And I voted, and I get it. But at the same time, remember that on the other end of the line is a volunteer that is, at the end of the day, just trying to save our democracy. Okay. And so be kind, be thoughtful, just say, I'm sorry, I just got another one. There's no need to get nasty about it. It's true. That's what it comes down to. And so, it's all public records that we are now, over, campaigns have gone from persuasion conversations to very strategic. Okay, now we've got to whittle in on this group. Right now, we are calling the people that are unlikely voters, haven't sent their ballots back, or have some other, mark on their record that we got to turn them out to vote.
Chimbo, I have a question for you along these lines. So your research is on new voters. So I'm voting for the first time. I'm not going to be in the voter record. How do we have those names? How do you actually reach out to new voters if they haven't voted before?
You could these organizations, local organizations in the county that do these kinds of phone banking opportunities, they can acquire a registered status.
Okay.
So this means that if you register, they can contact the specific individual. And so if you're trying to contact Asian new registered voters, you would look at the surnames and give them a call. So registered status is what they go off of.
And also everyone's data is public record, right? So a lot of like when you see these stats of, you know, there's I don't know what the exact stat is, but let's just use a number. Right? There's 47% of North Carolina is turning 18 before the election day. Well, guess what? We found that through data, and so we're calling those people to make sure that they are registering to vote, and then they get feed it into the system.
Right. Okay. I have a couple other things. So Cal alumni of Los Angeles are watching. That's cool. They say we encourage alumni to vote. Public
That's awesome.
Depends on it. Awesome.
Love that.
A question from, and they say go Bears. Sure. Wonderful.
Go Bears.
Do either of you have connections to Cal?
Yeah, I went there for undergrad. So yeah.
That's
so my
awesome.
friends are watching.
Yeah. Cool.
Your friends are watching and friends are voting together.
Yes.
Yes.
Welcome, Cal alumni. I love it. A question from Safiram. Forgive me if I pronounce that wrong. So, is ethnic identification in voting more pronounced in the U.S. versus other heterogeneous countries? Jimbo, do you know?
So if that's a good question. So one of my kind of like whenever whenever you guys establish this to do some comparative. So for instance, comparative research. So for instance, in Canada, to my understanding, there is no like Asian Canadian concept. Things are because of variation in migration waves in Canada and their system itself. It's very their national origin identity is like much stronger than it is compared to United States. So I don't know if it's I'm not sure what the status is in Australia, where we also see a lot of Asian community there as well. So I'm not really sure if I'm answering his question, but I don't think it's as strong as like, let's say Canada.
Okay.
Interesting.
Not as strong. Yeah. Interesting. Very good. Okay. We have time for one more audience question. Let's see what we got here. Hold on. There it is. My mother, sorry, Kate, my mother is observing that you must be a yogi. Are you a yoga person? My mother's a yoga teacher.
Me?
Yeah, I don't know why she's saying
Oh my
that.
gosh. That is the greatest compliment I've ever gotten. But honestly,
Okay.
Me or Chimbo? Me?
Yeah. Kate.
Oh no. Oh gosh.
Maybe because of the plants. I don't know.
Yeah, it's my plants.
It is the plants. Okay, great.
I need some yoga for my back these days. That's for
what I intended to talk about. Come on.
I'm a former ballet dancer, so I've gotten that before where it's like my
Very good.
Not so much these days. Thank you though. I'll take it. I love
Very
it.
good. We'll see if my mother explains herself. Great. So last question from Anne. So much like marketing, would targeted messaging by ethnic group, generation, and more be more effective than potentially getting canceled by younger folks like they do with brands? I see. So tell me if I got this right, Anne. So targeted message as opposed to threatening canceling people or something like that.
Sorry, my internet connection is very spotty, so I didn't catch the entire question.
So the question is would targeted messaging by ethnic group, generation be more effective than potentially getting canceled by younger folks like they do with brand? I think the question is like a flies versus honeys situation. Like if you threaten or entice people to vote. And correct me if I've got this wrong.
Oh, like punishing versus.
Yeah. Like a threat of like, we will shame you if you don't vote versus
I see.
We're like each other and we both care about voting. Yeah.
So I didn't do this research myself, but I remember a senior scholar having done this research, and I actually don't remember the results itself, but someone has worked on it. But yeah, that'll be interesting now because it's just been more divisive in general.
Kate, what's your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it depends on the conversation, right? I mean, when you phone bank, you get a script, and every script, depending when you're calling, is different. Like right now, we're just focused on getting out the vote. We're not in this, and yes, there's the persuasion stuff, but they're collecting all this data of what scripts are working and what's not, and so that they use that to kind of form how the outcome of these calls go. I do think put all of that aside, I think it's a combination of everything, and it also depends on who you're talking to. I mean, I think if you're talking to your aunt or uncle who's like totally on the other end of the spectrum of where you're at, it's may not be a shaming conversation. It may be a, listen, I have a pre-existing condition. Let's talk about what your vote means for me and my health and my safety and my life, right? Versus like, I'm not going to be your niece anymore if you don't vote. And I think
I have a correction, sorry, from Anne. Targeting by generation as opposed to other factors.
Generation.
Sorry, Anne.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends too on the relationship. I do think, we've seen a mass social media influx, and even in the last 2 years that we've done this research and data from 2018 primaries, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes out post-election. I do think the messaging to the younger generations is very different online than the older generations. And that makes sense, from a marketing and brand perspective. In terms of phone calls, I think, again, from a phone banking perspective, it really depends who's on the other end of the line.
Right. Very good. So we are past time. So I want to end with 2 questions for both of you. And also, Kate, I promised to ask about Senate races. So given the time, I'm literally going to ask you to list Senate races that we should have our eyes on. What are the top ones?
I'm going to do even better than that. Guys, this is the message. If we do not flip the Senate, nothing changes for the next 4 years. Okay? So we have to flip the Senate. We have to. There's no if, and, or but. The good news is it's looking good. The bad news is it's going to take all of us to do a little bit more work. So I urge you to jump on phone banks where there's key Senate races that we need to be focused on. And also battleground states. Texas, Georgia, South Carolina is not a battleground state, but Jamie Harrison is the one race that I think, besides Mark Kelly and John Hickenlooper and Sarah Gideon, which feel very confident, I would say Jamie Harrison is probably the next in line of being able to take that seat. Alaska, Al Gross. Focus on those phone banks. If you need additional help with the Senate, let me know. But again, any Senate candidate in the top kind of 13 that we're talking about needs help right now.
Okay. All right. And I have died the death of a nonpartisan show. This is just entirely partisan.
Sorry, I didn't even ask.
It's done. This is a hilarious ruse that I've run since March.
You know what? It's the last show. You're going out with a bag.
I sure am. There it is.
Yeah.
We're taking a stand here at Ask a Political Scientist. All right. So final 2 questions for both of you. Who do you think is going to win, and when do you think we're going to know the answer? Chimbo, you first.
Should I say my desired outcome? Well, I mean,
again, we're nonpartisan, right?
Right.
Yeah.
We're just going to nonpartisanly flip the Senate.
Biden-Harris.
Okay.
Biden-Harris.
And when do you think we'll know the answer?
Maybe I think the day the day after the election might be too early.
Okay.
My guess is. Yeah. So maybe give or take on one day after, but I'm not sure.
Okay. But within a few days. All right. So Biden within a few days. Biden-Harris within a few days. Kate, what do you think?
It's a loaded one. I'm going to go Biden-Harris, and we're going to flip the Senate, and we're going to keep the House. It's not going to be close, and even if it's a blowout, it's going to get fought, and it's going to get pushed back from the other side. And so I think, realistically, it's going to be. We want every vote counted. In many states, they don't count all votes until Friday after the election. In Alaska, they don't even stop counting votes until the 17th. So I would say we have an idea within 7 to 10 days, but I think that it will probably be, I want to say early December before we can say, okay. We know. And I think that is more around the Senate because there's so many races and there's special elections with the Senate too that could go into January. So
right.
It's true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Until that last piece, at least we had everyone within 2020. All right, folks in the chat, if you want to share, I ask our guests every week. I don't think I've ever asked you. So in the chat, share if you who you think's going to win and when we're going to know. And I don't know if we're going to win democracy. Maybe that's the problem. All right, Chimbo, where can folks find you to follow your work and keep up with all the awesome stuff you're doing?
I have a Twitter handle, but I'm not on it as much. But it's I think it's Chimbo PhD or something like. Yes.
I know what it is.
That sounds like me here. I'm like, I don't know.
And you're also ChimboChongPhD.com is a place to find your research.
Yeah, ChimboChong.com.
ChimboChong.com. All right, great.
Yep.
And And Kate, I have you at Friends Vote Together. I don't have anything personal for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. You don't need you can find my personal information, but that's all right. It's public record. Instagram, Friends Vote Together, is our main hub of information. Our website is friendsvotetogether.org. That has, and has all the information as well. And you can always message me. Our email address is on the website, and you can message me through Instagram as well.
Awesome. But it's a great landing page. The minute you get there, it's like, what do you want to do today? Flip the Senate, do this. It's awesome. So friends.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
No, thank you both so much for being here. As a reminder, we're raising money today. You can send any donation, large or small, to paypal.me/AskAPS. And this week we are supporting two organizations, Save Our Chinatowns in San Francisco and Oakland, and the Asian Americans for Equality Small Business Relief Fund in New York City. Both give financial relief to Asian American businesses that are struggling due to discrimination during the pandemic. And now I'm saying Asian American with a very
yeah, I know. I'm now thinking
about my own mind, but I don't want to assume whether they're Chinese American businesses or Korean American or what have you. So Jimbo, do you know?
They're mostly Chinese restaurants,
Okay.
but there are other Southeast Asian business owners, so list of owners there as well.
Awesome. All right. So send any amount that you've got over here. Check out friendsvotetogether.org and follow Chinbo PhD on Twitter. All right. Thank you to all who have been joining in our very special election.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yes.
This is fun.
Thank you both for being here. Vote, everyone. Phone bank. And I hope there's no reason to have a follow-up Ask a Political Scientist to debrief whatever happens. I hope it's very clear and that's it. I hope I never.
But the work isn't over, so we may need to keep going. I like this. I'm in. And for Jimbo's book release, we're having a party.
That's right.
Yes.
We'll be back for Jimbo's book release and some kind of phone bake live stream. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. I'm Andrea Jones-Rooy. I'm so grateful to all of you who have been watching. Vote, and we'll see you all on the other side. All right. Thanks so much, both of you, and have a good night.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Happy voting, everyone.